The Arizona Territory in 1878 was a place that thinned people down to their bones. Dry air scraped the throat. Wind carried dust through every crack and stone. In the middle of one such canyon, a girl had learned to survive alone. She had been left behind when a raid scattered her people. Soldiers pressing from one side, settlers from the other, and the younger ones forced to run. She had been 14 then. Now, at 18, she still kept the same fire ring and the same lean-to shelter, built tighter each year with brush and rock, as if her family might come back and need it whole. Each morning she woke stiff on a blanket patched with rawhide and looked out at the canyon floor. The same walls stared back, red cliffs scored with cracks, high ledges where hawks circled. She rose, shook sand out of her moccasins, and checked the traps she still set out of habit. Some days a rabbit, more often nothing. Hunger had taught her to crush mesquite beans, to roast prickly pear pads, to stretch water between the creek and a goatskin bag. She worked in silence because silence kept her steady, but her chest still tightened when she saw footprints that weren't hers in the sand. At night, she built a small fire. Always small, never too bright. It was not for warmth alone. It was a signal. Her tribe had seen smoke before. Maybe one day they would again. Each time she laid cedar on the embers, her stomach turned with the same question. If they were alive, why hadn't they come back? And if they were gone, why did she keep waiting? The not knowing weighed more than hunger. Her fears showed in the way she slept. Half on her side, knife near her palm, one ear tuned to the crack of stone. Coyotes yipped in the dark. Owls shifted overhead. But it was the sound of boots she expected most. She remembered soldiers kicking down shelters, rifles thrust forward, voices sharp with orders she could not understand. That memory never faded, and it drove her to guard every tool she had left. The fire, the blanket, the canteen, the camp itself. Inside, she carried two truths at war with each other. One, if she stayed, she might die of hunger or be found by men who would not let her live free. Two, if she left, she might never see her people again. Both were losses. Each day, she chose to stay, even as the choice grew heavier. Her mission, though she never named it, was survival long enough to be found by kin, to guard what little was left of her world until someone returned. Far from her canyon, another life was wearing thin. Calder Wren rode south through the territory with the look of a man who had not slept through a full night in years. His history was scattered behind him. Work on cattle drives, a fight that ended with a man buried on the edge of Kansas, a war that had put a Springfield rifle in his hands and left him with a quiet he couldn't shake. He had no family and no ranch to claim. What he had was a tired horse, a patched saddlebag, a rifle that stayed oiled, and a map in his head of places far enough from towns that no one asked questions. He told himself his mission was simple. Keep moving until the noise in his chest slowed, find ground where a man could be left alone, mend fences and live by trade. But he carried more weight than supplies. Each time he stopped to make camp, his mind turned over the choices that had driven him out of Kansas. People lost, words spoken in anger, promises broken. He did not expect company, least of all in the backcountry canyons where nothing moved except cattle strays and the wind. It was smoke that changed the line of his travel. Thin, gray, rising where no ranch or line cabin should be. He pulled his horse to a stop on the ridge, narrowed his eyes, and studied it. Not a big fire, not a camp of men. A single column, careful, steady. He tightened his grip on the reins. Men on the run sometimes lit such fires, or desperate folk with little left. Either way, smoke meant people, and people meant decisions he had been trying to avoid. When Calder led his horse down the ridge, his jaw set hard. He told himself he would only look, then move on. He wanted no part of another person's fight, no ties, no past dragged up. But he knew already he was not the kind of man who could ignore smoke rising out of a canyon. Calder guided his horse down from the ridge, dust sliding off the rocks with each careful step. The smoke he had seen rose from a narrow crack in the canyon wall, just enough to mark life, not enough to draw a crowd. He reined in before reaching the floor, tied his horse to a juniper, and walked the last stretch on foot, boots soundless against the stone. He carried his rifle slung across his back, hands open at his sides, not wanting to appear like another man ready to take what wasn't his. From the shadows of the shelter, the girl saw him long before he saw her. She crouched low, knife in hand, the blade angled so the light would not give her away. Her chest pounded, not only from fear of being found, but from the rush of choices racing through her mind. She had always feared soldiers first, ranch hands second, and lone wanderers last. But even one man could bring ruin. Should she stay hidden and let him pass? Should she strike first if he drew closer? She did not know yet if he was danger, but every bone in her body told her to hold ground. Calder paused when he caught sight of the dark eyes watching him through the brush. He lifted one hand slowly and spoke, his voice low and steady. "I won't touch what's yours." He set down a folded blanket on a flat rock, then stepped back 2 paces. The girl didn't move, but her grip on the knife eased slightly as she studied him. His face was worn and sunburned, his clothes patched but clean, not the uniform of a soldier or the fine shirt of a rancher. He looked like a man who lived by moving, not by taking. He left the blanket and walked back toward the creek. There, he filled a tin cup with water, placed a strip of jerky beside it, and left both on the sand. He didn't linger. He mounted his horse and rode a short distance before stopping at a small rise where he could watch without pressing too close. The girl stayed hidden for a long time after he was gone. Her thoughts twisted in knots. Why had he left gifts instead of demands? No man did that without expecting something in return. Her stomach cramped with hunger as the smell of dried meat reached her, but distrust was stronger than hunger. She waited until night before she crept to the creek, drank quickly from the cup, and carried the jerky back to her shelter, eyes sweeping the ridges with each step. Calder, camped under a mesquite a half-mile away, slept lightly. He lay with his rifle across his chest, every sound waking him. Coyotes sang far off, but no boots approached, no horsemen. As he stared at the stars, his mind churned with questions. Why was there a girl out here alone? Was she Apache, as the stories said, still lingered in hidden camps? Or had she been left behind in some other way? He had heard talk of patrols pushing families off land. If she had survived this long alone, she was tougher than she looked. He told himself not to return. He had his own past to keep buried, his own reasons for staying clear of people. Yet when he closed his eyes, he pictured her thin face in the firelight, wary and stubborn, and he knew he would not ride far in the morning. The next day, the girl tested the edges of trust. She walked to the creek at dawn, drank again from the tin cup, and left a stone in its place. A small mark, but enough to say she had seen what was offered. Calder found it when he came back to fill his canteen. He picked up the stone, weighed it in his palm, and set it carefully on the same rock where he'd left the blanket. He added a coil of thin wire from his saddlebag, useful for snares or mending. Again, no words. This silent exchange went on for days. A gift left, a sign returned. Each time, the girl's fear lessened but never disappeared. Her thoughts were torn between need and suspicion. Was this kindness or the start of a trap? Why didn't he ask for anything? She could not answer, but hunger and loneliness pressed her toward him even as caution pulled her back. Calder wrestled with his own doubts. He had promised himself not to take on another burden, not to tie his life to anyone else. Yet each time he left something behind, he felt the weight of his solitude lift a fraction. Questions hung unspoken between them. Who was she? Where were her people? Why did she stay in this canyon year after year? And from her side, who was he? Why did he help instead of harm? What shadow of the past had driven him into the same empty country where she lived? Both of them carried secrets, but neither spoke them. Instead, they let silence do the work of words, each gesture building a fragile bridge neither dared admit they needed. The canyon became a meeting ground. The girl stayed in her shelter, Calder in his camp. Yet they both moved within sight of each other now. She saw him mend his saddle strap, gather mesquite for firewood, and patch a fence post near the creek. He saw her skin rabbits with swift cuts, set traps along the draw, and move with quiet skill that spoke of years surviving on little. He noted the way she never turned her back fully when he was near, and she noted the way he never reached for his rifle when she appeared. By the time another week had passed, suspicion had softened into something else. Not trust, not yet, but a thin line of understanding. Two people, both left behind by the world in different ways, circling the edges of each other's lives, waiting to see if the other would stay or disappear. The next mornings followed the same rhythm. Smoke from her fire rising in a thin line, Calder tending to his horse by the creek, both of them moving in sight of one another, but never too close. What had started as silent trade began to carry weight. The girl wondered every time she picked up what he left. Why? What did he want? She had known only men who came with demands. Soldiers who ordered her people to move. Ranchers who shouted when cattle strayed. White men in towns who spat when they saw an Apache child. Yet this one left food, water, tools without words. That unsettled her more than threats would have. Calder, for his part, spent long nights wrestling with himself. He told his horse aloud, because talking to the animal cost him nothing, I ought to keep riding. Don't need to be tied up with anyone else's fight. But in the quiet afterward, he admitted what he would not say otherwise, that he could not ignore her. She was surviving alone where most grown men would have starved, and he respected that grit. Still, he asked himself if she was truly alone. Maybe her people came at night. Maybe men watched from the ridge. If he got too close, he could be marked as a trespasser or worse. That worry kept his rifle within reach whenever he approached the creek. It was on the fifth day that the first words were spoken. Calder was mending a cinch strap near the creek, his back against the cottonwood. He had seen her shadow move in the brush, but kept his eyes on the leather. She stepped closer than she ever had before, still gripping her knife, but no longer hiding it. He looked up only when she spoke. She said her name, clear and steady, her voice hoarse from disuse. Then silence. He repeated it back, slower, careful with the sound. She watched him like a hawk studying a stranger's step. Then he gave his own name, Calder. He did not offer a hand, not wanting to push too far. She tilted her head, repeated it once, then fell silent again. The moment passed, but it mattered. For the first time, they were more than shadows moving around one another. That evening, she left something for him, a strip of dried rabbit, carefully cleaned. Calder hesitated before taking it. He knew enough about pride to understand what it meant. She had so little to spare, yet she shared it. He ate it slowly by his fire, thinking how long it must have taken her to catch and prepare. For the first time in years, he felt the small weight of being included in someone else's work. Days stretched into weeks, and their exchanges grew. She showed him a patch of mesquite beans heavy with pods, teaching him how to grind them into meal. He showed her how to tighten a fence post without wasting wire, how to stitch leather with an awl. They still spoke few words, but gestures filled the gaps. She began to understand his patience. He began to understand her caution. There were questions listeners might have wondered in the first chapters. Why did Calder, a man who claimed he wanted solitude, keep coming back? In these days, the answer became clear even to him. He had lived years moving from place to place, carrying the burden of choices that left him hollow. The silence around her was different. It wasn't the silence of guilt. It was the silence of endurance. Standing near her camp, he did not feel haunted, only steady. And why did she, after years of avoiding every outsider, let him stay near? The truth showed in the way she lingered when he worked. She had waited for her people until hope had worn thin. She knew they would not come back. Hunger and loneliness gnawed at her more than fear of this man. Calder did not demand, did not press. He left space for her to choose. That was something she had never been given before, and she clung to it. By the time the first heavy summer storm rolled over the canyon, they were moving side by side at times. She carried fish cleaned from the creek. He carried a small sack of flour from town. Together, they cooked a meal on the fire, both watching the rain hammer the rocks. They did not speak much, but their presence was no longer by chance. They were choosing, step by step, to remain. That night, after the storm, Calder lay awake listening to the steady rhythm of rainwater dripping off the canyon ledges. He realized he was no longer planning to leave at first light. For the first time in years, his mind was not on running from his past, but on staying in one place. And the girl, curled in her shelter, knife still within reach, realized she had not built a signal fire in 2 days. Both carried the same unspoken thought. Maybe survival no longer meant waiting alone. Summer heat bore down heavy on the canyon, the kind that cracked the soil and forced every living thing to move slow. Calder and the girl had grown used to working near each other now, not side by side all the time, but within reach, a rhythm that felt less like chance and more like an agreement. He spent mornings cutting mesquite branches for fence repairs and stacking them by the cabin near the creek, while she gathered cactus fruit, grinding the seeds into meal with steady hands. Each evening they shared what they had without ceremony: flour flattened into rough bread, fish roasted on coals, beans boiled until soft. It was during one of these evenings that Calder finally asked a question he had avoided. How long? His voice was even, not pressing, but the weight of it made her freeze. She stared into the fire, eyes locked on the flames, then lifted her chin. For years. She did not need to explain what she meant. For years, since her people had scattered, for years since she had built fires no one came to answer.